Carl Jung said that consciousness easily succumbs to unconscious influences, which are often truer and wiser than our conscious thought. Additionally, it frequently happens that unconscious motives override our conscious decisions, especially in matters of vital importance. Many people tend to undermine their own agendas, leading to frustration and bewilderment. They find themselves making irrational decisions, experiencing mental blocks, and even suffering from physical ailments that paralyze their plans. It's as if a mysterious force takes control, steering them away from their intended goals. This continual self-sabotage means these individuals never seem to reach where they want to be. But why do we self-sabotage? Why do we ruin our plans for no apparent reason? The psychiatrist Jung discovered plausible answers to these questions. By becoming aware of a part of the psyche he called the shadow, we can see it as a psychological container within the realm of the unconscious. In this dark place where the light of our conscious awareness does not reach, we store our undesirable traits. There could be several reasons why we hide certain unwanted aspects of ourselves under the rug. Our parents might not like them, or they may not fit the social ideal, or life has taught us that they lead to suffering. We repress these traits by banishing them to the depths of the psyche, as if they weren't part of us, but they are. According to Jung, repressing these unwanted aspects of ourselves does not solve the problem. In fact, it can have disastrous consequences, as these aspects take on a life of their own, operating in the darkness. This is where self-sabotage begins. The repressed parts of the personality revolt against our conscious minds from the depths of the shadow. We are at war with ourselves without even knowing who we are fighting against. Fortunately, there are ways to stop this self-sabotage. Instead of repressing what's in the shadow, Jung urged us to integrate it into our personality. We can only do this by making the unconscious conscious and discovering what lies beneath. We will explore the psychology of self-sabotage and how to overcome it, based on the works of Carl Jung. There is a common misunderstanding about the shadow that leads to much confusion and misunderstanding about the role of the shadow and how to integrate what has been repressed. The shadow is often thought of as simply the dark and negative side of the personality, due to the problems it can cause. It is often seen as the part of us that harbors all our negative impulses. As a result, the shadow, as a psychological concept, is often symbolically represented as a sinister figure, suggesting an ominous other self that exists outside our consciousness. But the shadow refers to something fundamentally different. It is more like a dark place than a dark and sinister figure. We might think of the shadow as a dark closet in the human psyche where the light of consciousness does not shine. This dark closet is where we lock away all the repressed parts of the personality that we are not willing or able to confront or reintegrate at the moment, for various reasons, such as trauma or unmet needs. So, when we talk about doing shadow work and integrating it, we are not integrating the shadow itself. We are integrating the contents of the shadow. By the contents of the shadow, I mean all the repressed parts of the personality. These are the parts of the self that dwell in the dark place that is the shadow. Just as you could put objects in a dark closet and they would be enveloped in shadows, you could also take those same objects out of that dark closet and bring them into the sun, and they would no longer be wrapped in shadows. This is also true for the parts of the personality that dwell in the shadow. There is nothing inherently shadowy or negative about them. It's just that they have been placed in a shadowy place and are operating outside our conscious awareness, often causing problems for us due to this disconnection. An important realization here is that when these parts of the personality are repressed, it's not as if you simply have some repressed traits. It wouldn't be entirely accurate to say something like repressing my greed or repressing my joy, because both greed and joy are floating qualities. To repress a quality like greed, joy, or anything else, you would have to repress a complete fragment of personality associated with those qualities. These fragments of personality that detach from conscious awareness, often called aspects of the shadow, are actually more like mini-personalities. And each of these mini-personalities is 100% you because they are fragments of your personality. When these mini-personalities detach from your conscious awareness and are placed in the dark closet of the shadow, they become separate and autonomous from your conscious personality. which is the ego and the part of yourself that is in the light of consciousness, which you refer to as I. In the same way that our conscious personality or ego has its own perspectives, needs, and agendas, each of our shadow aspects also has its own perspectives, needs, and agendas. The agendas of any given shadow aspect may or may not conflict with the agendas of our conscious personality. When the agenda of your conscious personality clashes with the agenda of one or more of your shadow aspects, this can cause quite a bit of internal turmoil and a feeling of resistance or fighting with yourself. You can notice your shadow aspects and their agendas in action when you engage in procrastination and self-sabotaging behavior that prevents you from making positive changes in your life. These fragments of personality, detaching from conscious awareness and often referred to as aspects of the shadow, are in reality more like mini-personalities, and each of these mini-personalities is 100% you because they are fragments of your personality. When these mini-personalities detach from your conscious awareness and are placed in the dark closet of the shadow, they become separate and autonomous from your conscious personality, which is the ego, and the part of yourself that is in the light of consciousness, which you refer to as I. In the same way that our conscious personality or ego has its own perspectives, needs, and agendas, each of our shadow aspects also has its own perspectives, needs, and agendas. The agendas of any given shadow aspect may or may not conflict with the agendas of our conscious personality. When the agenda of your conscious personality clashes with the agenda of one or more of your shadow aspects, this can cause significant internal turmoil and a feeling of resistance or struggle with yourself. You can notice your shadow aspects and their agendas in action when you engage in procrastination and self-sabotaging behavior that prevents you from making positive changes in your life. Let's discuss an example of how shadow-based self-sabotage can manifest in someone's life and hinder their plans. Suppose a man strongly identifies with being solitary. His goal is to run a successful online business and live in the countryside because that lifestyle minimizes interaction and dependence on other people, which he consciously believes is what he ultimately wants. Even though the idea of self-sufficiency is feasible, he repeatedly undermines the progress he makes. For instance, he is offered the opportunity to buy land in nature at a friendly price but rejects it for a flimsy reason. Or he attracts a considerable number of followers to his lifestyle blog with much potential for profit, yet decides to stop posting. He cannot explain his decision with solid arguments from the perspective of the ego, the way he consciously perceives himself and determines what he wants and needs, making his choices nonsensical. After all, he strongly identifies as the solitary Batman, having dreamt for years of being self-sufficient, independent, and away from the herd. But as soon as his dreams become reality, he throws an obstacle in the way and cannot explain why. It's as if something or someone is sabotaging him, as if an unwanted guest is hiding in the shadows of his soul, unsupervised, outside his conscious awareness. This person quickly takes control without consultation, destroys what the efforts of the ego have achieved, and then leaves without a trace, just like any solid reasoning to support his self-sabotage. The mysterious guest remains elusive. He knows something strange is happening in the darkness, but cannot pinpoint it, as it is beyond his conscious reach. And as long as he cannot illuminate what lurks in the shadow, it will govern him like a puppeteer from behind the curtain. As the Jungian analyst Morin stated, any autonomous complex not subject to conscious will exerts a possessive effect on consciousness, proportional to its strength, and limits the latter's freedom. When our shadow aspects take the reins, destructive consequences can arise. Inexplicable desires and emotions can emerge from nowhere and, when they please without permission, overriding our authority and diminishing our willpower, they influence, sabotage our conscious agendas while pulling the strings from behind the scenes, leaving us perplexed at our irrational behavior. Dr. Morris Stein wrote the following about the sabotaging nature of complexes. Complexes function to hinder the process of individuation, intimidating the person into emotional dead ends. One can easily fall victim, for example, to an implacable need for revenge and implacable anger towards injuries inflicted in childhood, or fall into the bottomless abyss of nostalgia. The complex has its own will, often stronger than the ego's ability to resist it. The mini-personality hiding in the shadow of the man represents a repressed characteristic, the desire for human connection. Due to past wounds, he has been deprived of it and is not aware that this unwanted aspect of himself has become a shadow government trying to undermine the actions of a fearful isolationist disguised as a lover of solitude and independence. Yet unknowingly, he deeply longs for companionship from the depths of his psyche. This repressed personality plays a paradoxical game. On one hand, this shadow aspect wants to be part of his conscious awareness. It wants its motivations to be heard, its desires felt, and its needs met. Thus, it sabotages the firm individualism of the conscious personality and all its efforts towards independence. As a result, he lives with roommates and washes his clothes in a public laundromat where he sees many people. This situation may seem inconvenient and undesired from the perspective of his conscious personality, but it's precisely where the shadow aspect wants him to be. On the other hand, the shadow aspect does not want to be illuminated, and its evasion is understandable because it represents not only the unwanted, but also revolts against the person who repressed it. If found, it will lose its sovereignty. So, while remaining in the shadows, it maintains the power to troll, sabotage, and autonomously destroy. It remains its own personality, and above all, safe. But in doing so, it is in perpetual conflict with its host. There are various reasons why self-sabotage can occur, but in the man's example, the self-sabotage comes from a shadow aspect responding to an unmet need, the need for connection. From this shadow aspect's perspective, the conscious personality's agenda of extreme independence is entirely antithetical to this need. Deep down, this mini-personality knows that when its host achieves financial success, he will have enough money to have his own house without roommates, his own vehicle, and his own washer and dryer, so he will no longer go to the laundromat where he has much social interaction. The shadow aspect also realizes that having more money means having more capacity to neglect and ignore his need for connection and socialization. Thus, in a desperate attempt to preserve the scarce connection with other people that this shadow aspect receives, it sabotages his financial success and manipulates the conscious personality to avoid financial success by making inexplicably unwise business decisions. It might also create different rationalizations and mental blocks about success, and perhaps every time he wants to work on his blog, he suddenly feels overwhelmingly tired and just wants to take a nap, even though he was perfectly energized and awake before. Now, the solution to the self-sabotage that comes from a shadow aspect with an unmet need is quite straightforward. The first step is to recognize the needs and agendas of your conscious personality and the needs of each of your shadow aspects, which requires observation and brutal honesty. If this man in the example is very honest with himself, there will be many clues throughout the day that he actually values connection and a sense of belonging. He just has to be willing to acknowledge these things and admit them to himself. Once he realizes this need, it is his role as the conscious personality to weave this need of the shadow aspect into the conscious personality's agenda for financial success, and to make the necessary changes to meet that need. Instead of imagining himself becoming totally independent when he achieves financial success, he can envision having more time and freedom due to the money he earns, and using that time and freedom to socialize and connect with friends and loved ones. The solution would be to satisfy the needs of the shadow aspect in this way, so the shadow aspect does not have to sabotage the goals and dreams of the conscious personality to ensure that these needs are met. As we learn from Carl Jung, be aware of your shadow so that you are not unconscious of the dominion it exerts over you.